Okay, so we're going to go to our next speaker, and I'm delighted to say that our next speaker is Branka Petrov. She's from Serbia. She's a PhD student of philosophy, a feminist activist, and she is going to speak on the ontology of gender. And Branka, we're having a highly intellectual feminist question time today, so it's quite hard for us to keep up. Will you tell us what ontology is, when just for anybody, because some of us don't know what ontology is, but in your talk. But thank you so much for coming, and over to you.
Ontology, in short, is the field in philosophy that deals with what being is, like what is something, how something comes to be, right? So whatever you have, if you want to know the essence of it, you're already on the field of ontology, right? If you ask about essence of thing. Now, my presentation is going to be the fragments of my PhD research. And now when I say this, I'm already reminded of this movie, Midsummer, when, actually not movie, but when the director Ari Aster was asked about why he make movie about PhD students. And he said, you know, when you want to make sure that what you're saying is not important, just say it's part of your PhD research. Like, this is guaranteed, no one cares about that. But anyway, yeah, because this is a feminist panel, I hope someone will find it interesting. I will restrict this whole presentation to one question. My question is, what is gender? What is the essence of gender? I do not offer any solution farther than that, because as a feminists, we are, especially today, we are met a lot with this question, and we talk a lot about gender ideology and this idea that we need to smash patriarchy, smash gender ideology, destroy gender should not exist, etc., etc. But somehow, when we are confronted with gender, we are confronting with something solid, something that it exists. And even I find myself, when I see men cosplaying as a woman, I recognize him as a woman, even though I know it's ideology, and I see him that way only because there is this social pressure or social ideology that I should see women certain way and men certain way. But even though I know all that, I still somehow my emotional state is such that I don't see him the same way I see men who cosplays as a masculine man, etc. So obviously, and not only that, but if we say that gender is ideology, plain and simple ideology, history, so many ideologies come and go, and it is in nature of ideology that it is product of time, and with time it disappears. But gender, somehow, what we see, it persists. It is, whatever it is, and it exists, and we are confronted with material. It creates problem, it produces reality, it is our reality. So if it is, even as an ideology, it still is. So what is it? This is the question that we need to ask, because if we want to smash it or to destroy it, we need to know what we are destroying, right? And with this, if we ask this question, what gender is, we are on the field of ontology. We ask philosophical ontological question. I will draw upon terminology, a little bit terminology of Martin Heidegger, who is controversial figure in philosophy, but I'm not going to deal with his controversy. I will just borrow some of his terminology. So I will start with ontology as such, with short history of ontology, and then I will come to the problem of gender. Let's say first, in ancient times, there was the idea that there is a subject and there is an object. An object exists independent from subject. And if subject is to understand what object is, it needs to have a certain methodology with which it will finally understand what this object is that exists. Even without subject, it exists as such. And this is the ontology of Plato, this is ontology of pre-Socrates and Socrates philosophy of Aristotle in the whole ancient time. Then in modern times came the switch, where it is said there is this idea that object exists independent from the subject. We cannot accept this idea anymore. The subject is constitutive to the object. This is the idea that only through the lenses of subject that sees, that confronts this object comes to have a meaning. Without the lenses of subject is just a fact, just a natural occurrence. It has no meaning, right? For something to have a meaning, for object to have a meaning, it has to be confronted with subject. So the world that exists for the subject is the world of subject and not world of the object. And only when subject confronts the object, it has this, and this is what is in phenomenology, what is called phenomenon, right? Phenomenon is object as seen through the lenses of the subject. So not natural fact, not natural occurrence, but only in this relation of subject and object. And then in 18th, 19th century, and it prolonged in 20th and 21st century, came and became popular the idea of historicity. Historicity is the idea that not only that the subject creates the object, that the object only exists for the subject, but also the idea that object exists through history. So this idea that development, but we don't have to define development as progressive force, that whatever we define the development, this idea that object exists in time is constitutive to this object. We cannot think of object outside of time, outside of history, outside of historicity. And this historicity, this is the subject perspective, because human is historical, subject is historical being. And so there was philosopher, some call them father, whatever that means, father of phenomenology, who wanted to radicalize this idea. And he said, so there is this absolute historicity that is last transcendental principle, that all the validity of the world, all the truth of meaning of the world, of the human world, if it's to be sourced, it needs to be sourced from this transcendental principle of historicity. So anything that exists in this historicity. And in his words, he said the historicity is structure of being. So being, and this being, this is the transcendental, absolute transcendental subjectivity. So his philosophy is philosophy of subjectivity. Anything that exists. Anything. If we are to define anything that exists, we need to go back to this transcendental principle of historicity. And now we are coming to what is important to us, and where I'm going to draw from infamous Heidegger. He came and he said, it's not that being is structured historically, that historicity is the structure of being. It's that being is time, being is history. He put this equation there. And with this, because with Husserl, we had subjects confronted with this objective world, needed to, from this absolute historicity, it needed to constitute meaning, to constitute reality. Subject constitutes this world that it projects in front of itself. But with Heidegger, when he put this equation between being and time, what he said is, we are not talking about constitution, because constitution implies a relation between subject and object. So you are in relation with this object. Before that, before any engagement of subject in the world, there is already some structure before that, and this is the what he calls Dasein. This is a German word. There is not good translation, but it is the being here. This is the specific situation of human, and what he calls human. The situation of human is that it is thrown into the world. So your thrownness into the world is already pre-structure of your understanding. So if you are to engage with this world, you can only engage as this thrown thing. And as a thrown thing, before you even have any understanding, you're already thrown as something. You already are meaning. So it's not that you give meaning to the world, you already are meaning as such, with this being thrown in the world. And this pre-structure of understanding, this is how he calls it. In this pre-structure of understanding, there is certain factors. He calls it factors, content. And I will name, he names, I think, more than 3, but I will name the most important 3 factors that are the content of this pre-structure of understanding. So it is labor, because as human, you are predestined to create. You cannot, even animals create sometimes, but human cannot live like animal. You have this predisposition to labor, to create. So you're already, before you have any engagement with the world, with objective world, you already are determined by this predisposition to work, to labor. The second one is language. Human has predisposition for language, and this is very important for those modern linguists of 20th and 21st century, who tend to reduce philosophy to just language. I am not on this side. I don't belong there, analytical philosophy. And then third, which is going to be important here for me, for us, is being tied to body, to corporal body. And those are 3 most important factors of this pre-structure of design, pre-structure of understanding of design. Now, Heidegger, because he considered man universal subject, he didn't even come to think that it's not only that we are tied to a body, but we are also tied to essentially different bodies, right? Male and female. And Heidegger, of course, didn't think of that, and no male philosopher thought of that, but it is also. So not only we are determined by being corporal, but also we are determined by being corporal in 2 different ways. And when we act in the world, when we engage in the world, we engage already determined to see the world from the perspective of being corporal in certain way, in 2 different ways, right? Now we'll go back to this language as also structure, pre-structure of understanding. I will go to another philosopher, Karl Otto Appel. He's more contemporary. He passed away maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that. He was linguist. And what he wanted to do with Heidegger philosophy was that he tried to, because for Heidegger, for Husserl and for Heidegger and for this whole tradition, they were still in the realm of transcendental subjectivity. So this design is individual, it's a subject. So as a throne, it's individual subject in the world. So what Karl Otto Appel wanted to show was that it's not individual subjectivity that is transcendental principle according to which meaning is created, but it's because meaning for individual, there's no meaning. Just individual is natural fact. If you don't belong to community, there's no meaning around you. For meaning to be created, there needs to be community that decides this meaning, and there needs to be consensus about meaning. For anything in the world to have meaning, there needs to be community, not just individual. Individual does not exist as human. So he said this transcendental principle is not transcendental subjectivity, but transcendental intersubjectivity. So what he calls ultimate transcendental principle, that all meaning needs to be sourced from, ultimately, is what he calls the communication community. Community of that community, which is humanity as such. Limited to academia because the world is not perfect, but ideally it's humanity as such. And this I find very important because I would agree with this idea of intersubjectivity being ultimate transcendental principle. But then if we apply, and we can do that because I'm not linguist like Karl Otto Appel, I can apply this same transcendental principle of intersubjectivity to this being tied to a body, to corporality, then what we have is, if we have two different bodies as the determinant for our being in the world, male and female body, but as such we exist just as natural fact, right? But the moment with our bodies, when we have to act in the world, when we have to engage with the world, we are in the field of intersubjectivity, and this is the field of gender. So I would argue that gender, equally as sex, is ontological category and cannot be demolished because there's no, biology is just natural fact, like tree growing in my garden is natural fact. The moment humans have to interact in the world, they're in the field of intersubjectivity, and this is where gender is created. What I'm not arguing for, that gender should be worshipped or whatever. What am I arguing here for is that, yes, there is gender ideology, but there should not be equation between gender and gender ideology, because gender is ontological category, and there happens to be this ideology, gender ideology, that feels this category. So we fight against ideology, but that does not mean that gender should or could be destroyed. Gender is a matter of intersubjectivity as such, and we cannot exist other way than intersubjectively.